Joe's here. He's joining us.
I'm here. I'm just here to frame the shot.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been so exciting being in Cincinnati, and I got to end cap my Cincinnati time. Here, as soon as I got off the plane, came to the Strong Towns event at your office. Was immediately in love with it. The keyhole is killer.
What's your favorite part of the office?
The keyhole.
That's part.
But the books and art arrangement also. Like, there's just something really fun and thoughtful in every single little corner that you look. And it makes me really jealous and feel like, you know how the cobbler's kids never have any shoes?
Yeah.
My office is an absolute disaster. I would never have people over there, right? We don't have clients over a lot. It's got like doors leaned up against the wall and like an extra marble slab that, you know, needs someplace to go, and boxes of lights and things. So it's so curated and it's so beautiful and it's so consistent with your brand, and it's such a great...
Thank you.
It's such a great statement of kind of the thoughtfulness that you guys are taking through all the lines of things that you do.
Yeah, my wife's favorite part of the office, speaking of the books, is that I got all these books out of my house.
Oh, that makes sense.
Joe, this is Joe's personal urbanism library.
Yeah.
It's great. You have a great library.
Yeah. Our house doubled in size.
There's so many art books too. Like, I don't know who's the Matisse fan, but there's so many good little Matisse pieces.
Well, and that was with the designer too. Had put some of her personal touches on that.
Okay, great. Well, your designer is.
She's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yes,
Incredible.
Charity was our designer. One thing, the office has really showed well this week at CNU. We've talked about it a lot with people who've come in. The one thing that Charity did that I think is like the future of office is that, and I didn't realize till we actually moved in here, is that really no matter where you are, if you're on Zoom, you have an interesting background.
Absolutely.
And I think that was I've never talked to her about it, but I think that was very intentional on her part. So there's like no boring Zoom background, which I think is kind of like the future of office.
It's the future of office.
The Zoom background needs to be important.
The only thing that I can't believe none of you have done is shift your desk over in front of the sculptural bookcase, because I think that's the best Zoom background in the office. Yep. And there's not a desk in front of it.
Yeah, the printer gets all the good.
The printer gets the good background.
I think at a minimum we need to move a chair like this back there.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason to be back there at all, let alone a Zoom. So we need we need to create a little quiet space back there.
Yeah, it's such a good corner.
Good. Well, that wraps the podcast. We're here to talk about the office.
No, and how much I love you guys and all your full work, and it's really exciting to meet you. And I've heard.
So, how has your week gone? You did the day-long workshop. How's it going?
It's good. I mean, you know, Congress is always I mean this only in the most positive way. It's always a real slog. It's 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. day after day, 100 million conversations.
It's both energizing and exhausting. It's like simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a handful.
Yeah.
So it was good. It's the longest stretch I've probably done on a Congress, because we added those two shoulder events. So I came in on Monday. We had an all-day 8-hour workshop that was, we sold out of small developers on Tuesday. So thank you both very much. I know you both helped kind of get the word out on that. And then we had Strong Towns on Wednesday. I had one session I had to speak at Strong Towns. I had 4 sessions yesterday that I either moderated or spoken.
Oh my gosh. They all went well?
Yeah, they were great.
That's good.
I've got one thing to do today. And then I'm actually going to sneak out tonight and go home, because I have little kids and it's tough being gone this long. Yeah. So it's been really good, and it also has been funny. I feel like the last 2 years, we've sort of distinctively gotten roasted in a session by like a real established new urbanist. And if you've been at the last 2 Congresses, you probably know what I'm talking about, but I won't name any names. This year the roasting felt so light, and it only happened at Strong Towns. We had no like established new urbanists roast us at all yesterday. So that was surprising.
Roasting I am not familiar with this. I was at the last 2 Congresses, but roasting in what way? Like a critical way, like criticizing incremental development?
Yeah, and just the comments at CNU. I think the Q&A period has always been a way to. There's as many comments as questions, and it's always there's a real openness to challenge among the CNU crew. that I think
Well,
has
that's
always
what's great
been-
about CNU
Yeah.
is there's like an open debate. But
Yeah,
what would be
they've
the
always been-
criticism of incremental development from a CNUer?
Last year, it
Like,
was
what is that?
we
What do you
weren't
hear?
producing enough affordable housing.
Weren't producing?
Yeah, enough affordable housing. And I think
That was a known new urbanist that says that? Okay.
and I
That's surprising.
I clapped back pretty strongly about
Okay.
that, right? That like we as an organization, and you know, for kind of background of anybody that we jumped right in. Incremental Development Alliance is a national nonprofit that trains small developers. We have a couple of really kind of, you know, banner prerequisites, right? One of them is it's not extractive development, and so one of the models that we use to really promote additive development is that you should work in one place long term, and you should live there, right? You should be working in your own community, you should be working with your neighbors, you should be building trust, and that this kind of development doesn't work. Ensuring that you are not extracting or taking advantage of a community is really hard when you're developing not in your community.
And before we wrap this up, by the way, I want to tell a story about last night at
Okay.
the pub crawl.
Okay.
Connected back to Memphis and exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah.
Don't let me forget that.
Okay, that's perfect. So one of the other big tenets that we, preach over and over again and have for 10 years is that if you can't get the rent, then you shouldn't build the building. And that these are projects that have to cash flow. They have to make money. So we've always been a relatively anti-subsidy organization, right? We're not saying don't do it. If you do it, you're doing it wrong. We're just saying there are enough projects that you can do that you can make pencil that you should be focusing on those. That adding in subsidy, adding in grants, it adds a layer of complexity to projects that often small developers, you're adding risk that you don't have control over. And
Right.
and that a lot of our work is also trying to de-risk people's projects, that we, take really seriously, the faculty, that we are telling people to get into a risky, hard, long-term business. And so really coaching them through how to do that in a lower risk way. It's simplifying projects. It's being really realistic about your own capacity at the time, right? That there's kind of this seasonal capacity for each one of us. Did you just have a baby, right? Are you starting a new company? Did you just buy a new house? Like that there are times in your life that like you should take on an even lower risk project. And so keeping things small, keeping things simple, doing projects that pencil on their own, not waiting on LIHTC credits, right, to come through, not doing like big, complicated, don't buy an old gas station, don't buy an old dry cleaner, like that work has to happen.
We bought our own gas
failed.
station.
Hey, okay, great.
It's fine.
Well, but you're
It's
still
fine.
here.
What?
You're still here.
It's about to be a coffee shop. It's going well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I love it.
I think a world where we can build housing with less subsidy should be a non-controversial thing,
yeah.
or no subsidy.
Yes.
Like the idea, it should be our goal to create a system where we're building neighborhoods that aren't reliant on federal money.
Yeah.
We have this. Well, every city is talking about affordable housing.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yep.
It's the crisis du jour, as Joe said recently.
Yeah.
And it's important. We had a study done here in Cincinnati probably 5+ years ago at this point that said we have 40,000 units shy of what we need. And that has, I think, shaped a conversation that has been very unproductive.
Yeah.
In the sense of the conversation tends to be, to your point, around subsidizing restricted rents.
Yep.
But we're never going to subsidize our way to 40,000 units.
Yeah. Yep.
And so creating a market where small projects can happen and fill the world with more supply, coupled with LIHTC and other subsidy projects. But we don't talk enough here about the missing middle, the incremental, how we start to flood the world with more units and naturally occurring affordable units.
Correct.
And that's what you guys kind of preach.
Yeah, and it's what we do. I mean, we are literally, we and all the developers that kind of have touched this. Because I also think of IncDev as like a big tent, right? There's lots of different people doing lots of different versions of this, and that is part of the secret sauce, right? There is not one way to do this. There's not one, set of acolytes. Everybody's doing their own thing and testing it, and that is the way it's supposed to work. But our office has produced probably 30% of our units are naturally bankable, pencilable projects that are affordable for 100%, 80 to 100% AMI in our region for sales. And we've done some that are even, lower than that. And some of that is, you guys may have heard me say this before, but one of the big things that we don't talk about enough that is driving this shortage of housing, it's not just population growth, it's that our household size is really dropping.
Yeah.
And so as we, our population growth is part of it, but the bigger part is, since the 1950s, our average household size has dropped in half. And
But you're
so
helping out with 5 kids.
I'm doing my best, man. Like 9 people live in my house some days. You've got, twice as many houses that you need to house the same population that we had in the 1950s when our household size drops in half.
Right.
And so that's before we start adding in new people. And so one of the things that is like a really natural first step realization from that is that we need dramatically more small dwelling units. A third of our households are one person living alone. Another third of our households are 2 people living together, usually a romantic couple without kids. And so, 2/3 of our households are sleeping in 1 bedroom at night. And so what we need is this enormous increase in number of individual units, and that is super opposite the way our land use policy works, which is capping dwelling units per acre. We're not capping size of units, we're not capping square footage of built space, we're capping the number of stoves that we're putting in, right, with dwelling units, that's that definition, fixed cooking elements. And so we really, kind of IncDev is really working towards how do we get more guest suites tucked in? How do we get more ADUs tucked in? How do we increase that density dramatically to hit it is naturally cheaper housing if it is smaller and there's less of it and it's sharing land cost.
That's right. I was having this exceptionally frustrating discussion with the leader of the local home building association.
Exceptionally frustrating.
Yeah. And he said, I'm going to paraphrase, that he could solve the housing shortage if he could get $70,000 a key off the price. He could bring that many more people into being an eligible buyer of a home. Okay. And he couldn't solve it. And I said,
he couldn't figure out how to make his houses $70,000 cheaper?
And he refused to talk about taking 400 square feet out of the house to meet that market.
I'm putting them on smaller lots. I think that's...
Yeah, right. And he talks about his front foot costs, and he talks about his price per square foot, and he could not make the connection that his buyer is exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
When it gets into what Ross calls like Ross Chapin, who was just in here, the livability quotient, right?
Yeah.
Like maximizing the livability of the square foot.
Yeah.
And some of that is, for your listeners, right? My single biggest thing about designing small format housing, because we mostly design small format housing. We do occasional big, custom homes. 90% of our product is under 1,500 square feet. And I think the number one secret for that, which is a Lou Oliver trick, you have to be able to fit a normal sized sofa in the living room. You've got to lay out with furniture the small units. You got to show the furniture, because you need to be able to fit a king size bed and walk around it, and you need to be able to fit a normal size sofa. And ideally, there's at least one wall for a big piece of furniture that you inherited from your grandmother, because those are the 3 things that make it feel like a normal sized house. And you want no hallways, right? You want absolutely no wasted square footage. Your dining space can be a little nook, it can be really tight, but normal size sofa, king size bed, one wall for a big piece of furniture somewhere in the house feels like a big house.
I love the tension that you had on stage with John yesterday around tiny house versus small house. Yeah. Explain that. So I thought you had an interesting take on it.
One of the, it has been really satisfying, kind of one of the things that I love the most about CNU is how accessible some of kind of the great mentors are to everybody at CNU. And so I met Ross at CNU in Seattle, however many years ago that was, and have gotten so much out of that. He's
the Ross relationship.
He's so generous and positive, and he has so much grace for the world. And I always feel a little bit less jaded spending 10 minutes with Ross. Yeah. And one of the other ones is Lou Oliver, right? Who I think has really impacted the way our firm thinks about sales and marketing as one of our primary jobs. One of the things that we work for a lot of developers, right? I am a small developer. I have a design practice with a team of 10, and most of the work that we do is for developers. And so we're designing housing that needs to be really marketable, and they're going to make more money if we design really marketable, really constructible plans. And so Lou is enormous on keeping feedback going with your sales agents. Mm-hmm. What do people love? What do people hate? Which plans are selling first and why? And so a lot of that has shifted our thinking too in how we market this work. And so we have tongue-in-cheek. I think we have a pretty playful vibe generally as a firm. It's a really young firm, just in age of all of our team. Everybody has little kids, and it's a very female, high population. I joke sometimes that we do have 2 male employees. We have some good diversity. One of them was a stay-at-home dad when I hired him, though, so we fit a real specific market. So we have a tongue-in-cheek, real playfulness with our sales and marketing. And one of the things that we've had really good success with on our most popular plan is, we call it the Mini. All of our floor plans have women's names. Several of them are named after our kids or our moms or the first woman who lived in the house, or somebody kind of related to it. So we have one that's called the Mini, and it's 520 square feet. It's 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. We've built it as an ADU. We've built it as a cottage court. We've built it as those pantry duplex townhouses that they get shown all the time because they're cute. They were the first time we built it. And they sell fee simple, on their own platted lot. And we marketed them as tiny homes. And we market a lot of our stuff as tiny homes, where we'll use that verbiage. If we're not explicitly calling it out, we're really referencing that. And I think some of that comes from the punchline on that, I guess, before you leave, that thought is, when somebody expects it to be a tiny home and comes and looks at it the first time in person, they're like, it's so much bigger than I expected, right? And then we're kind of setting this expectation and then trying to exceed it. And John feels really strongly anti-tiny house movement.
Like just the word tiny?
Yeah. They're not technically tiny houses, right? Which I think is under 400
But is John's
feet.
issue with just like the
like
way
a lesser house.
People interpret the name, not like the actual square footage, or?
Mm-hmm. That you are apologizing for it.
Okay.
Or
and
calling
I
it
think
a
there's
lesser.
the cognitive connection to it being trailered into if you Google it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has a reputation that, yeah.
Yeah, but I think playing with the reputation and expectations is fun. Like people think tiny houses are cute, and people think tiny things are cute, right? Like we love kittens, and right, we love weirdly
Well, and so
small
much of our
size.
tech is shrinking and everything like that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to take the reverse approach, which is like lower the expectation.
Yeah.
Embrace maybe the idea that John has of like that it has a negative thing, and then you get in there and you're like, well, this is very livable.
This is so livable.
My 7-foot couch fits in here.
Yeah.
So you started that by saying something that I think is really smart around connecting with your sales team and understanding what the feedback loop is. Yeah. So did that realization come from that kind of feedback?
Totally. The first phase of houses that I built as I tell the story, right, that I became a developer when I was 16. I went to college when I was 16 and used my college savings to buy kind of a gross house and renovated it through college with my sister. We both were in architecture school together, and that was our first fix and flip. And
this is like another episode. I need to hear more about going to college at 16 and becoming a developer. But go ahead.
I don't have a high school diploma. I think that's a really important factoid about me. I have a master's, so no one's ever asked to see my high school diploma. But I never actually graduated from high school. I just went straight into college.
Again, another episode.
We can.
A three-parter.
Yeah, right.
And so, starting out, I'd done a lot of fix and flips and renovations. And the first time I did new construction as a developer, I bought an acre and a half of land downtown in Fayetteville in 2016. I had to do land development. I had to install a sewer line and cut in a private street. And it was a really good little micro test case, right? Of like, it was land development, but it was little land development. The numbers weren't that unachievable. And so the first round of houses that I built, I knew I had to build in comps. So our comps at the time were $165 a square foot. Everything in our region is priced per square foot for new construction, nice stuff. And we were targeting to sell our stuff at around $320 a square foot. And so part of the strategy on that is I built the first one really small so that the total purchase price would be really affordable, and I knew I could get a cash buyer who wouldn't care about the price per square foot because the total purchase price was under $200,000. So the first house I sold was 700 square feet. It was a 2-bedroom. It had a bedroom down, 2-bathroom, a really cool master suite upstairs, little bedroom and full bath downstairs. And then kind of comped them in. And so the next one was the same bed and bath, but 15% bigger. Next one was 15% bigger than that square footage. So I worked at a regional bank for a while, and so very closely followed all the underwriting directions, right? We say small developers who are women sometimes do better because we'll follow all the directions. We'll just go down the list and check box. So we did that with that first phase. And first one, we had 2 people who owned it was a couple, they own a cool company in Fayetteville. They'd been living in a van for 2 years, and they were coming back and they were gonna buy a house. And I was like, this is my perfect buyer. Like, they're not gonna think it's too big. They've been living in a van.
There's an Arkansas joke in here somewhere.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I
mean, they'd been living in a
Be
Mercedes.
nice.
Or a Chris Farley joke.
They're Chris Farley. They've been living in like a $500,000 Mercedes Sprinter van, right? That was like fully kitted out. Like, they own a pretty nice company.
Yeah, it was
a lifestyle choice.
It was a lifestyle choice. They were like surfing a lot.
Yeah.
But also, they'd been living in a van for 2 years. Like, I was like, this is my target buyer. I know that they have the cash to do it. They're gonna have this total perception of space and efficiency and this total appreciation. And they came in and they were like, ugh, why is it so small? And it was such a realization that like we had not pegged their expectations appropriately.
Oh, interesting.
Right, they thought it was gonna be bigger, and they couldn't wrap their heads around it only, it not having like a big primary bathroom, it just having like normal size bathrooms. And so that was, I think, that first realization of how important setting the expectation of what the house is going to be like ahead of time is. And sometimes I think about it like, in a Frank Lloyd Wright house, the entryway ceiling is always like appallingly low, so that then the ceilings in the main house feel much higher.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the approach I try to take with sales and marketing, where we never list stuff until it is totally done and clean and the landscaping is done outside, right? Because you can never explain to somebody what it's gonna be like. And so I think it's sort of the same thing. We set the expectation low, and then we really wanna blow people away, kind of, over exceeding it.
Yeah. Huh. So one question I had.
And you have a hard stop in a minute, right? 10?
Okay. This could be a closing thought, but you're the host, so you get to decide. And you gotta leave, so you get to decide.
Yeah,
I have to go hop in your Zoom room.
Yeah.
I have a Department of Defense call.
Oh my gosh, well.
Jeez.
Maybe this could be the 4th podcast, but I was really blown away by not just the one master's degree, but you're an architect, a landscape architect, a developer. You have that Swiss Army knife diagram in your deck.
Yeah.
You're a generalist almost by definition, but you're also very good at, out of necessity, in drilling down into the minutia of detail. How you can constructed your practice, I mean, those are both equally very important things, but not very many people can do both. How do you approach that?
I think the thing that we're successful at is being able to know which details from a million specialties are important and how they all relate. And it's the nesting and the filtering of the importance.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is our entire team did something else before they came into design or development. And so we've got this real diversity of experience that I think helps us think through stuff, right? And think about all the different things that are gonna link in. But I think my favorite thing is being able to do kind of the dual brains, right? That we want to build something that works in all of these different ways. And so we're finding that neat little slot through all the problems.
Sounds similar to Yard.
Yeah, no, I know.
We have these different backgrounds, and we intentionally, including Chris behind the camera here, intentionally plug them into stuff that is not their expertise, and it brings, it creates much better products, much better outcomes.
Yep.
That are much more accessible by normal people.
Because our world, planning, revitalization, whatever you want to call it, there is no expertise.
There's no expertise. That's right. Okay.
And I know you got to go. I want to say real quick, because I brought it up earlier, I just want to close out this thought. I don't know how involved you were or are in Memphis with Tommy's work there. I know John was very involved.
Yep.
We did some work in Uptown Memphis, and around the time that some of the incremental development was taking off with the Memphis Medical District, and met Andre. Do you know Andre?
Yeah.
Yeah, we met him, 6-7 years ago at this point, who was a weekend warrior kind of small developer, had a day job.
Yep.
And I ran into him last night at the pub crawl, and it was the first time I'd seen him. And we stayed in his Airbnb when we were there. And I just think, I know we don't have time to dig into it, I just wanted to bring it up, that as a closing thought, Andre is a really good example of kind of circling back to this idea of we're not going to subsidize our way out of this crisis. That guys like him can actually build housing, live in it, build it in their neighborhood, transform their lives into from working at FedEx to a full-time developer, building wealth with their neighbors, with their friends. And it was just really fun to see him last night. And that whole story of Uptown Memphis is, I think, from you have a lot more examples, but my example of why incremental development really is important and matters for places. So
Totally agree.
On that thought. All right,
Thank
to
you.
your
Thank
call.
you.
Department of Defense.
Thanks, guys.
That sounds more important than this. All right, see ya.